Hello, Fuel Milwaukee. Hello, Milwaukee Film followers and members. So excited for our collaboration today. The Fuelers know we've been doing Race Bridge for several weeks here now, and it's a little different. We switched up on you a little bit today. Today's the collaboration with Fuel Milwaukee and Milwaukee Film's Minority Health Film Festival. So excited to have you all here. I see you coming in. Come on in the room. So get comfortable with your controls. You know, I like gallery style. I'll stop sharing here in a second so you can see all of our panelists' face at once. That's my favorite way to watch, but you can do the panelist view if that's what you like. And you know, I always ask you to go into the chat. That chat room is yours during this conversation. So make sure when you go in the chat, you change the controls so that you are responding to all the participants and all the panelists, or just the panelists directly, or just me if you want to ask me a question. So in the chat space, you can interact with each other. I've already told the panelists that they can kind of hop in there and see what you guys are talking about and interact with you. You can also ask questions in the chat, as we have folks that are kind of going to and fro in there and pulling out questions for us. Also, you can ask questions in the Q&A if you want it to be a private question that only I see. My name is Corey Jovito, and I am the Executive Director of Fuel Milwaukee, and I am so excited to have all of you here today. I think by the time we're done with this conversation, we'll have over 1,000 views on Facebook and 200 people participating here live with us. So we're going to have a great conversation about housing, health, and because this is Race Bridge, we'll talk about race and how they're related to each other. So as I mentioned, this Race Bridge conversation, you know, we've been doing this for a while, but today we're in collaboration with Milwaukee Film, who is running their film festival, their Minority Health Film Festival now through next week. Our conversation is about housing and health and how our external surroundings affect our internal well-being. In just a moment, I'll introduce the panelists you see there, but I want to take some time to recognize the sponsors for Milwaukee Film's Minority Health Film Festival, the Zilber Family Foundation and Manpower Group. Thank you so much. You guys saw on the website that there are movies and films associated with the film festival that sort of align to this conversation. One of those films is Cooked, which you'll see the trailer for during this conversation, and the others are listed on the Fuel website, so make sure you go there to check that out. Minority Health Film Festival is running now through September 24th, so make sure you go to the Milwaukee Film website to check out all of the films. This is an amazing effort, and the diversity of films is really amazing, but it's all around health, social determinants of health, considerations that are very specific to minority populations around health and your overall wellness. So this is for everyone. Milwaukee Film and the Froedtert Medical College of Wisconsin teamed up to pull this off. So make sure you check it out. Check out all the films that are involved. Okay. I'm going to give you a little taste so you can see what's involved here. You know what? I'm going to stop sharing really quick because I just want to make sure that I have my audio right. Yep, that's right. Okay, here we go. Just a quick overview of what the film festival is all about. So enjoy this and we'll get started with the conversation.
The 2020 Minority Health Film Festival offers a diverse variety of films and events that we just wouldn't be able to offer in the in-person cinema experience. But I think what really makes it unique is the focus not only on public health issues, but the issues that really concern communities of color. If you're looking for a reason to engage or to try it out, this is the perfect time. Just go to mkefilm.org/MHFF.
All right. So now let's get started with our conversation. I am so honored to be with these talented professionals. They have an expertise that I have a new appreciation for as I was doing research and reading about the connections between health and housing, I was really overwhelmed by how dynamic the issues are, and the depth and breadth of the research and solutions. And I'm really excited to get going with our conversation here. First up, we have Dorothy York, who is the COO of Axe Housing. I'm going to ask each of the panelists afterwards to talk a little bit about their organizations and how it relates to health and housing. But I'll let them have that. I wouldn't be able to talk about Axe Housing in the way that Dorothy will, but I'll give her a chance to chat about that in just a second. Dr. Shakobi Wilson is the assistant professor at the University of Maryland in College Park. He'll talk a little bit about his work there and as it relates to our conversation. Maduela Kirkendall, same CEO, is the director. She's the COO and the director of basic needs, that division within community advocates. So happy to have you here too. We also have Irma Yepes Klassen, who is one of the program officers over at the Zilber Family Foundation. So before we get started, I know this is not the best view of the space that I'm in, but it really is an attractive room. MMAC is moving. We're moving to the Avenue, which used to be the Grand Avenue. So right now we're displaced too, and we don't have a place for me to do our webinar. So space has kind of stepped up and let us come into this beautiful, this beautiful space that they have with conference rooms, private offices, shared office spaces. Is really great. Right here on Water Street, so my view is amazing. I'll show you after the webinar. So make sure you go to their website and check them out. They're doing a lot of great things. Okay, so let's get started with the conversation. I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to quickly go to the panel. And I want to get a little bit more in depth and a little bit more information about each of you and how your work and your passions connect to health and housing. So Dorothy, talk to us a little bit first about Axe Housing and how you got involved in this world.
Sure. So I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Axe Housing, and I got involved with Axe Housing through actually a friend who was serving on one of the committees. The position that I'm in became available. She introduced me to the organization against my wishes, and that's a joke between the two of us because I was like, I don't want to work for nonprofit. I don't want to work for nonprofit. And so she introduced me to this job, and we were joking at our Longest Neighborhood Table event recently because she said, she reminded me like that email started with an apology. I know you don't want nonprofit, but she thought I was perfect for the job. And as it turns out, she was right. Once I looked into the job, interviewed for it, I absolutely love what I do. And I could talk to you about all of the programs we have and things like that, but I guess we'll get into that in the panel. But I will say that one of the most important thing we do is to help individuals who low to moderate income families who otherwise couldn't afford home ownership to get a home. And when you see the appreciation, they're just so happy to achieve something that they really didn't think they could. When you see the impact of your work, it's really easy to have passion around what you do.
Thank you so much, Dorothy. Maduela, how about you?
Hi, Maduela Kirkendall with the Community Advocates. I got involved with this work, honestly, was in my undergrad, wrapping that up and started graduate school and was just looking for something to do. My plan was to be here for about 6 months, 12 months tops, and 21 years later, I'm here. And I think I stayed because of, again, I have to echo Ms. York, that there's definitely a huge need, especially here in the city of Milwaukee. But there's also a great opportunity to help a lot of individuals, and Community Advocates does that in a variety of ways. Again, I kind of oversee all of our basic needs division, and that encompasses housing, healthcare. We run shelters, safe havens. We do street outreach. So there's a host of housing services that we provide. Then there's also those ancillary services like energy assistance and things of that nature. And I think, in order for a family to be sustainable, have, stability in their housing, we need to wrap services around those families. And I think that's been key in helping Milwaukee families become stable in their housing situation, and then also stabilizing communities by doing that.
That's awesome. How about you, Irma? Oh, I'm sorry, you're muted. I know we got to get used to unmuting.
Oh, yes, I do. Okay. I have to say, I started this and I thought, oh, wow, I got a note in the chat from my first boss that introduced me to work in the community development field. So hi, Mike.
Wow.
And that brings it back for me. I am not from Milwaukee. This is my adopted home. I've now lived in Milwaukee for almost my entire adult life. And I went to Marquette, have a business degree, and I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I did know that I wanted to do something that was meaningful and that was for the community. And I received a position at Neighborhood Housing Services, was a nonprofit. So that was where my start was, doing community organizing, working with residents of neighborhoods in the South Side. Those are Healthy Neighborhood Initiative neighborhoods now, Layton Boulevard West Neighbors, Clark Square, Bayview, believe it or not, etc. So that was my first taste for doing community development work, and then just working with people and helping them to achieve what was for them the American dream: stable housing, home ownership. And so that led to my work at Neighborhood Housing, just advancing, doing work in the community, then working as a housing counselor and loan officer. That led to me leading and coordinating their housing programs. And then I received an opportunity through a colleague to be the deputy director of a small nonprofit, Select Milwaukee, that was just focused on home ownership, all things home ownership, preparing people for it, keeping them in their homes, and then doing that also through work with employers and workplaces. And that was 16 years of my life working to grow different programs. A lot of it mirrored my own experience as a renter, then a homeowner, and every step of the way, any challenges that I encountered, I thought, oh, geez, I had an issue with that. I wonder what other people are going through if they don't know. And eventually that led to a position at the city working for the mayor in a housing policy director role there. And that was an incredible opportunity and privilege, and was able to work with many of the groups and folks that are here. And actually it was while I was working at the city that I learned about the opportunity to work for an opening at the Zilber Family Foundation, who had been a funder of the organization that I previously worked for. So was really thrilled to be able to work on the other side in philanthropy and to be able to continue to support neighborhoods and organizations doing great work in the neighborhoods.
We're so thrilled to have you be a part of this conversation and share your perspective, which is so diverse. Dr. Jacoby, now you're the one that's not in Milwaukee right now. I probably should let you go first as our guest. So welcome to Milwaukee, and tell us a little bit about you and the work that you do.
Thank you for the invitation again. So I'm at the University of Maryland College Park. I'm an environmental health scientist, but I do a lot of work on environmental justice. So really talking about how some communities are basically used as sacrifice zones for environmental hazards. They may also have a high concentration of stressors, social stressors. People dealing with poverty, structural poverty. Let's not use the word structural. Let's call it structured poverty. Let's not use the term structural inequality. Let's call it structured inequality. It's not by accident, okay? And then also the same communities may not have access to what I like to say is health promoting infrastructure. Housing is a social determinant of health, right? Housing is culture. Housing is wealth. Housing is health. And so for me, the reason why I'm here is I think, you think about environmental injustice is due to racism, systemic racism, right? And you think about racism on our policies. So you got racism in our criminal justice policies, economic policies, our food policies, educational policies, and also our housing policies. So I want to connect those issues and then talk about how when you're dealing with racism and housing, how that impacts your health, not just when it relates to pest, mold, mildew, and dander, not just relates to energy efficiency and revitalization, also as relates to urban heat islands, right? And heat stress, and also other issues. So for me, homes are, as a microenvironment, are a very, very important part of how we live. And you got folks now who stuck in their homes who may be living in lower quality housing stock, which means increasing the exposure to allergens, right? Increasing the exposures to water vapor and humidity because of the mold. Increasing the exposures that are overcrowded to SARS-CoV-2 virus that causes COVID-19, right? Increasing the exposure to living near a highway where the pollution from the highway gets inside their home. So now the kid has another asthma attack. That's why I'm here, and also here to talk about solutions. So I'll stop. Thank you.
Okay, no, that was perfect because as I was researching on this, and Irma and I were talking about this, this is not my wheelhouse. So I had to learn a lot to know what I don't know, and became really overwhelmed by the dynamics and the issues and how interrelated everything is. So I found this, the 4 pathways connecting health and housing. So I'm going to show this because this was the thing that kind of helped me start to dissect what I needed to know. Now you all can let me know, and this is for the entire panel, walk us through each of these pathways and let me know if there's anything that's missing or anything that's not represented here. What I'm trying to do is give myself and the listeners a sense of the overall relationship between health and housing, and particularly in Milwaukee, race. Anybody can jump in.
So I'll jump in first and talk about that very first thing, the stability of housing.
Yeah.
And so at ACTS, we like to say that we help families move from renting to owning, because with them getting to owning, we're trying to get them to that safe, sanitary type of environment to live in, and that stability, because what we recognize is that renting is difficult. And it's really unsustainable for a lot of low-income families. And because of that, I mean, if you read the book Evicted, you can see how those families have frequent moves, and those frequent moves have a downward impact on the family, for everything from the kids' performance in school, to their health, to their mental health, and their feeling of security, because they're not really in control of their own situation, and they're often having to make choices, right? And eventually that choice becomes one that causes them to get evicted. And so they have these forced moves from one place to another.
What are the things what are the things that are happening in folks' lives that end up forcing them to move? Is it the price of the housing? It's just not safe? What are the elements that create this instability for folks?
So a lot of the houses that the people that get evicted live in are unsafe and not in great shape. But that's not the primary reason why they are forced to leave. Most often it's because of rent. If you understand that nationally, the portion of a family's income that's going to rent is like 60 to 70%. If most of your money is going to rent, if you have an unusual financial event, your car breaks down, can't get to work without the car, something happens where all of a sudden that month you're going to miss that rent or you're going to come short. It's mostly that they can't pay the rent, and they can't pay the rent because it takes almost their entire income. And so anytime there's anything else that happens, then they are in trouble.
Okay, so I'm going to show, this slide has a lot of text on it, but I'm going to show it because this is something that I found that helped me.
But Corey, I like that other slide. I like that graphic. That's a really important graphic that you showed.
Like it? Okay, I'm going to go back to it because I was going to ask you about the quality and safety piece, because you actually spoke to that in your intro. I'm showing this one just because of what Dorothy said around the affordability. So I like this because it kind of explained the definition of cost burden or severely cost burden. And I think most of us know this idea that your housing should cost around 30% of your income, not more. And there's this huge pocket of our populations in the United States that are spending up to 50% of their income. So that kind of speaks to what Dorothy is saying, like your car breaks down, if you have a hospital bill, if any one thing happens, it can throw off the whole balance of what you got going. So I'm going to go back to the other slide, Dr. Jacoby. Let's see.
Hey, Corey, can you put it in slide mode? Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's your last comment. So that's this whole term around this whole thing called energy poverty. So you got a bulk of their toward the rent, and then they're paying a huge amount of money towards paying for the energy bills. So it's a rent affordability issue, and you also have an energy affordability issue. So there's this whole, at least in the environmental justice sphere, there's this whole area of work called energy justice. It's energy equity issues. I just want to put that out there because there could be some folks experiencing, do you choose between paying for your medicines, your food, or your energy bill, right? And but getting back to this quality and safety issue, as Dorothy mentioned, you may have issues around, pests. I mean, you may have rental housing doesn't have good integrated pest management. So you may be dealing with pests, but there may be an overuse of pesticides to kill those pests, which then leads to exposure. And think about for children, right? Children are very susceptible to chemical exposures, and a lot of the pesticides that target the neurological system of the pests also do what? Target the neurological systems of children, okay? So that's one issue. But when you get back, go down to the last part of this slide, and I'll pass the mic to another panelist. The neighborhood environment, I like to use the term just sustainability. So your home's proximity to infrastructure is important. So do you have just transit access? Do you have just food access, right? Do you have just access to schools in your neighborhood or in driving this is your neighborhood? So those issues, because of your proximity of your housing and your neighborhood, also impacts health. So you have neighborhood level determinants of health too. So you have people who may be dealing this whole issue around food deserts and food swamps. The LaDonna Redmond, who's an activist in Chicago said those are the symptoms. Call it food apartheid, right? You got the food insecure, right? You got people who don't have access to mass transit. And then you have some neighborhoods, right, rental housing that's near the highway. So you have mass transit, but you have idling buses. So you've been exposed to pollutants that is contribute to asthma attacks, heart disease, blood pressure, stroke, diabetes, cancer, birth defects, infant mortality, impacting life expectancy, okay? So I'll stop there, but your neighborhood is really, really important. Housing is part of that. And so if we're not, how do we build healthy communities? Housing is a part of that. It's the anchor, and you build around the housing. You have to bring the infrastructure to the people. And you don't see that in a lot of our urban neighborhoods, particularly those that have dealt with a history of segregation and divestment and disinvestment.
Madwala, it looked like you were going to say something.
Oh, no, I think I've echoed a lot of that. I mean, what we're seeing also on a day-to-day basis is individuals being, facing housing instability because of domestic violence situations. And then the eviction itself creates instability going forward in the future. And so we spend a lot of time working with legal services, the courts now even on board with trying to seal records. So individuals that may face an eviction that may be dismissed, they would be on their record for 10 to 15 years. And now we have partnered and worked with them so that the eviction is no longer available to future landlords. That goes a long way because a lot of the landlords, especially here in Milwaukee, prey on individuals with evictions. And so you go from one bad situation to a worse situation. And so we work closely to kind of curtail a lot of that. And then also, again, in this criminal background, we're seeing a lot of landlords discriminating and not renting to people because of their backgrounds. And although there may not be a nexus to the crime they committed or they've been allegedly committed, and housing, they still won't rent to those individuals. And again, that drives them to some of those more scrupulous landlords that aren't taking care of their properties. And so again, going from a bad situation to another bad situation.
I want to kind of get at the crux of this. When we were looking at the neighborhood and environment section, a lot of the research and the reading that I did talked a lot about how certain undesirable development or toxic machinery and wiring is placed in neighborhoods of, intentionally that are under-resourced. And I just want to kind of, I think what I'm feeling is that because I'm from Milwaukee, so our community is so segregated, and I feel like you can't separate neighborhood from race, and the economic depression and disenfranchisement that our Black and Brown communities face are so tied to some of the structures that take advantage of the fact that they don't have resources to fight it. Dr. Jacoby, you spoke to this a little bit in the neighborhood and environment, and I know this is kind of your world. In cities across the nation, are you seeing the same things? I mean, I'm from Milwaukee. I've spent most of my life here, so I don't know if this is a consistent thing that you see in urban cities. Like how structural or how structured is this?
Yeah, no, thank you for that question. And then, it's, segregation, is like exclusionary zoning, planning, and development. And actually, so the corollary to segregation is really gentrification. Both, one is pushing you out and one is excluding you, but it impacts the same folks disproportionately, right? So segregation concentrates social risks, economic risks, and environmental risks. And you can look at the history of this country. I mean, I just did I was telling y'all before, I've been doing a lot of lectures, and so I've been saying the same thing the last few days. But one of the things I mentioned, like zoning, right? Zoning, the first New York City, there's this book called Noxious New York. And it talked about why you have so much pollution in certain boroughs and not in other boroughs. That was planned because zoning was used to separate not just people from pollution sources like landfills, right, from waste, but also separate people from each other. And so that's why, Manhattan looks different, doesn't have the same kind of pollution burden that, the Bronx does, right? You can there's a book written by Mindy Fullilove called Root Shock about urban renewal. And for many, communities, urban communities, what happened was the National Highway Defense Act, a lot of highways were built through our neighborhoods, right? And fragmented, destroyed the culture of our neighborhoods and led to, the loss of resources. But even go back further than that, the first city in the country that used racism-based zoning was Baltimore. It got thrown out of the Supreme Court, but then it was still built into the housing policies, right? It was still, you think about Levitt towns, for those you know about Levitt towns, racial covenants, right? So it's more than just redlining. There was all kinds of ways that housing opportunity structures were differential based on race. Let's get to redlining. Think about, hey, this neighborhood's people of color. We're going to redline it so lenders, hey, avoid this area. Oh, this neighborhood's primarily white. This is primarily white. Oh, this is good. So it's like, your skin color dictates your access to resource. In this case, your access to loans and your access to high quality housing. So what does that mean for us today? What's past this prologue? Now what you have is, remember I said segregation concentrates these risks. So now you have housing because of disinvestment, divestment, the lack of municipal service. You have neighborhoods that had differential access to food, differential access to transit. You have lower quality housing. You have folks that are dealing with pests. You have highways that built through our neighborhoods, man. Let me just say this. There's no reason why we should have communities with industrial hazards stacked upon stack upon stack near where people live. How you gonna put America first? You gonna put your kids first, y'all? We shouldn't have kids in housing with lead paint. We've known about the neurological effects of lead paint for decades. That shows we do not care. Think about the number of generations of kids that have been thrown away, their caps on their potential. It's just not Flint when you think about the water crisis, water lead loads. Think about other places in this country where we have lead pipes, but again, lead housing, lead paint and housing. We should remove that years ago. But again, like Dr. Bullard likes to say, it's the complexion for protection. Think about the book Color Law, right? You get to this issue of urban heat islands, right? Again, segregation, loss of municipal services. So guess what? A lot of concrete and asphalt in these communities. And then you build the highways, more concrete and asphalt in these communities. And then guess what? You don't have trees, y'all. What do trees do? Heat mitigation, air pollution mitigation, noise mitigation, stormwater mitigation. Trees are good for food. Trees are good for mental health. Trees are good for playability. No tree canopy. And then you don't have AC. So you think about the book Cooked. This is the 25th anniversary of the Chicago heat wave. That happened in July, right? 700 people died. Most of those folks were elderly folks, right? Poor folks. Heat waves are hell for the poor and the elderly. So if you live in poor housing stock with no AC, when you have urban heat island, where you have the heat being absorbed by the concrete and asphalt and it's re-released at night, so your temperatures stay hot all the time, what's going to happen? You're going to have heat stress, heat morbidity, and people are going to keep losing their lives until we fix that. And that's all about racism, and that's all about segregation. I'll stop. But
No, it's good.
Getting fired up. Let me stop.
Irma, I know you just watched Cook the other day. I'm gonna show the trailer for it. And I wanna get your reaction to having seen it and talk a little bit about the contrast between healthy housing and housing that's not healthy for folks who haven't seen this close up. So we'll start with this, and then I'll, when we come out of the video, Irma, I'll be coming right to you for a reaction.
What's the best way to prepare for disaster? It's a question lots of people are asking these days as the planet heats up and we face one unprecedented disaster after another. My interest in disasters started with one specific disaster that took place in Chicago in July 1995, one of the deadliest heat waves in US history so far.
We go to extremes in Chicago, and that's why people love Chicago. We go to extremes.
I walked into the room and I saw my grandmother lying across the bed, face up. I looked over at the window and it was nailed shut.
Sexiness for the news media was it was about the heat. But the real story is, why were people in these neighborhoods dying? People weren't dying on the north side. People weren't dying in the Gold Coast. People were dying on the south and west sides.
The minute you see the refrigerator trucks, that means there's so many dead bodies that the coroner doesn't have room for them anymore. That's enough.
I think it's really about the heat.
It's not really about the heat. There is no need for as much poverty in our community as there is.
It's a story about these deeper social fault lines that make some members of a city vulnerable and keep others protected and blissfully ignorant about what's happening to people who live quite close to them.
Do you think they're addressing that?
So I think the city is addressing the extreme poverty in communities of color in Chicago. Is that what you're asking me? Don't be ridiculous.
So what's the best way to prepare for disaster? I guess it depends on where you live.
So that film is affiliated with this discussion in the Minority Health Film Festival. Irma, you just saw it. What was your reaction to it, and how have you seen that play out in a different version in real life?
Well, I grew up just outside of Chicago, so I was just thinking about that. And I actually grew up in a suburb just outside, it was a very much a working class neighborhood. But I remember driving through many of these neighborhoods and seeing the stark difference in the amenities and the lack of amenities that were there. And I think that that's really what drove the work that I do today, really wanting to make a difference and seeing the inequities and wanting to know why is their community so different than ours? And we didn't have a huge home. We had a small, typical Chicago ranch style bungalow, but we had a park district that we could go to and a pool that we could go to, sprinklers, yards, to play in safe environments to be. And I was really moved by that because, again, folks were victims in their own communities that they grew up with, and saw the change in how the lack of investment and continued disinvestment in the neighborhoods grew to impact their livelihood, to the fact that they couldn't even, many of them folks died because they couldn't open the window. They didn't feel safe enough to even just have simple air or put in a window fan or air conditioning. So I was really moved by that. And so, I mean, that's just, I'm still really moved by that because it's now a different experience looking back on that. What was that, 30 years ago? But I was in my youth at that time, so.
So in the scenario that we just saw, I mean, I misspoke before and asked Irma, has she ever seen this play out in real life? This actually is real life, it happened.
Yeah.
and it happens in different ways. I think what I meant was locally, because that didn't happen to Milwaukee, but it still is under that pathway of quality and safety. Shows up in different ways for folks.
Well, and you see it play out now. I was just on a call. Milwaukee United is a group that's been working on an agenda to address anti-displacement, and in some ways looking at how to implement some of the recommendations that came out of the anti-displacement plan. And how do we get past some of the inequities right now that are faced in many of the communities to get access to capital, to make improvements in the areas? How do we encourage investments, et cetera? So one of the great things I feel really fortunate about in terms of working for the Zilber Family Foundation is its dedication to enhancing the well-being of individuals, families, and neighborhoods by supporting the great work that many of these organizations are trailblazing and doing. You know, the work of Axe Housing, the work of community advocates and its Public Policy Institute in addressing health and housing issues. How do we help to support them? We know through our Zilber Neighborhood Initiative, our goal is to improve the quality of affordable and stable housing within neighborhoods and the economic well-being of the people who live and work there, and to make sure that their voice is heard, you know, that they're involved in the planning process, that their concerns for displacement or gentrification, whether there are signs of its presence or not, but that they're there so that, I mean, they see that the development is happening in some areas, but they want to make sure that it's not just going to speculators that are coming in and enriching themselves and leaving and have no interest in the community. They're all about, like right now, this big discussion about community ownership, local ownership. How do we get access to the same capital that's available to my white counterpart? You know, I live here, I've been in the neighborhood, I've seen it through its good and bad. I want to tap into some of that equity that's available that we know lenders will be willing to lend, but maybe are not lending to me because of the color of my skin, or because of the geography of the location of where my home is located or my business is located. So I don't know if that answers your question or not. I mean, it's very prevalent right now. And so we're here to support the organizations that are really working to address those issues.
So I'm thinking, I was about to say, let's make it plain, and I immediately thought about church because that's where I learned that phrase from. But let's make it plain for the people to tie in everything that we've been talking about: housing stability, safety, financial burdens, neighborhood and environment, to health outcomes. So are we talking about, in some instances, it's obviously physical health. If your landlord has nailed shut your windows and you can't open the window, you know, in the heat wave, or if there are rats biting children, all the way to mental health, the stress of knowing that 50% of your income is going towards rent, and you're having to make decisions. You know, am I buying medicine, or am I, you know, paying the electricity bill? You guys work much closer to this than I do. What have you seen in people's lives, for people who don't know anybody who is living in these situations? What does it look like? What are some examples? What are some of the scenarios that you've seen and had to work through? Well, probably I should ask you, Evan, first, and then go from there.
Typically things happen on a Friday at 4:30. We're getting ready to close, and a mom is in our lobby with her kids in the stroller and has nowhere to go. And you know, oftentimes the conversation is, we don't spend a lot of time trying to figure out why she's there. We just try to find her housing right away. But you know, during the course of, you know, finding stable housing or temporary housing, we often find that usually it's a one-time incident that leads this person to housing. It's just that one. Something that's normal for like someone like us, you know, would kind of, we can get past it and we can stay in our housing. It doesn't take much for someone to end up homeless and out on the street. So we see that often. I think and you think about it, if you're most people care about their children. They want the same for their kids as everyone else does. They want stable housing. They want them to go to the same school. And for a mom to now look at her kids and they're sitting in our lobby, you know, waiting for the cab to get there to shuttle them to our shelter, it's demeaning. I mean, and then for kids who go home and their belongings are outside on the curb, I mean, that and their friends are seeing all of this, just from a mental health standpoint, I mean, it doesn't go away often. I mean, go away fast. So, I mean, kids carry that with them. We see them at our shelter, and then that's the other thing. Now they're leaving school, getting on a bus, and they're coming to our shelter and trying to explain to their friends like where they're going for the day. So there's, I mean, from the kid standpoint, there's just a lot that that's weighing on them that, you know, most people don't have to deal with.
There's so much research about how people's health outcomes just improve drastically from the diseases that they have or don't have, their stress level, life expectancy. Dorothy, can you talk a little bit? The thing I like about Axe Housing is that you kind of get families through the whole process of like the home buying process, getting their financials in order, you know, reclaiming an abandoned or vacant house, and just really be helping to revitalize communities and becoming a part of a new community. It's so dynamic, the work that you do. But my favorite thing about it, when I go to the Longest Table event in person, is that you follow the families. It's like you really stick with them and they become a part of Axe. It's like its own family. What have been some of the turnarounds that you've seen once you see a family actually get in their own home, and what kind of improvements are they experiencing as a result of it?
Sure. So I want to just, I'm going to answer that. I'm going to do it in a roundabout way, if that's okay with you.
However you do it.
I just wanted to comment on some of what Dr. Jacoby was sharing, right, about the intentionality of the situation we find ourselves in, where certain groups of people are relegated to this place that they are. And it happened over quite a long time, right? It was restricted covenants and redlining and all of the things that said, if you're Black and brown people, you can't live here, you can't go there, you can't get this type of mortgage, you can't get mortgage insurance, and so you can't get a loan. And this was 400 years in the making. And I just wanted to comment on that because you see a lot of people jump into this space and they think that things should happen overnight. Well, they can't happen overnight. This problem was a long time in the making. And so as new ideas and programs, I'll call them, and city and government initiatives are put in place, they really need to be put in place. And like, let's see what 20 years from now, let's measure this. 30 years from now, let's measure this, because we took hundreds of years to make this mess. So I just wanted to comment on that. But I'm happy to be at Axe Housing. We've been in existence. We've been doing this work that we do for 26 years, right? And over those 26 years, we've helped over 2,700 families get into home ownership in the Milwaukee area primarily. We've helped them reclaim over 900 distressed homes that are boarded up and needed to be fixed up. I've seen people take houses that it's hard to even look at. How they saw the potential in it is beyond me, but they saw potential in that house, and they went for it and they rehabbed it and made that house a very beautiful home for their family. But one of the most dramatic, I think, kind of turnarounds is a young lady that bought a house through Axe Housing before I went to work for Axe Housing, but she's been very involved. She's been part of our Longest Neighborhood Table events. She's served on panels that we put together for alumni homeowners to talk about their experience and what they do and why they do it. And one of the things that she said was that, you know, she pays her loan because in her mind, it's important for that money to be there for another family like hers. And I happened to be at the office and our admin was out. And so I was answering the door, and she came in to make her her final mortgage payment. And she pulled up in this cute little sweet Mercedes, and she was wearing these really nice boots. The counselor was like, "Oh, those are really nice boots." And she was like, "Yeah, I just got them." So I was like, that's the way it is when you're coming in to make your very last mortgage payment, is you've achieved this kind of level of financial security that her as a single person with her children could not have done without the fact that she was part of this program. And so that's one of the most dramatic turnarounds I've seen, like in one person. But we've only been at this for 26 years, and we're the only ones doing what we do right now. And so it would be great if ACTS could move to other areas and expand beyond Milwaukee. We are now in Beloit, but imagine if we had more ACT Housing is doing what ACT Housing has been doing for the last 26 years. We can make an impact. We feel like we're making an impact. Last year alone, we helped invest in $19 million into this community, into safe, affordable housing for people. But how great would it be if we could have the same impact in multiple cities?
Absolutely.
And quickly, I'd just like to jump in. So Ms. York, she brings up an excellent point. I think oftentimes, and I think the struggle for me over the 21 years that I've been doing this work is that there are oftentimes we find things that work, and then there's a new administration or there's a new person in charge, and their focus is not the same. And all the work that you've done for those 3 or 4 or 5 years is essentially erased by, one person making one decision. And we often see that, locally and at a federal level.
Yeah.
So let's go to talking about solutions and the things that can be done and the things that are being done. Irma, we talked a little bit about the city's plan. I'm going to share it on my screen quickly here, but kind of tee this up for us, the anti-displacement plan, as I'm sharing it. You were there when it was being written. You're not with the city anymore, but can you give us a little bit of context to what the intention was and if there's been any success?
Yeah, the overall goal of the anti-displacement plan was to ensure that there's choice and equity in prioritization alongside the traditional development, in terms of folks who are setting policies and approving the different developments that are happening in the neighborhood. And by prioritization of choice, they recognize that development is occurring in neighborhoods, and this was referring to neighborhoods directly surrounding downtown, where there was real concern from neighbors seeing new development coming in and making sure that they also had an opportunity to be able to stay within the homes. Some of the new developments were coming in and the rents were definitely a lot higher than what was accustomed for many folks that were living in the area. And so also making sure that there was equity so that the folks who were coming into the neighborhoods weren't displacing those that had already been there for a really long time. So it was really about making sure that choice and equity were being prioritized for folks that were there, and that their housing options and solutions that were available that would maintain affordability for those that were there, either through naturally occurring affordable housing, so homes that were already available that were affordable in the market, and then through potential incentivization of retaining a percentage of affordable units within different developments that are there. But the bigger thing was making sure that people from the community, people who live and work in the neighborhoods, were at the table when these decisions were being made, when the plans were being developed, when a new development was coming into play, that they could say, yes, this is what I'd like to see as part of my neighborhood. And I think as part of that too, I know the foundation made a contribution towards this. This does impact 2 of the neighborhoods that the foundation focuses in on, Lindsay Heights and Park Square, which is an anti-displacement fund. So as property values appreciated in the neighborhoods, is making sure that there was a tool or some type of resource that would allow homeowners, long-time homeowners, to be able to offset the rising cost in property taxes. Many of the families have been in neighborhoods for a long time. They may own the homes free and clear, and they're on fixed incomes. And so they just didn't have the ability to be able to transfer that. And so, that was really the gist of that. And then working and seeing, one of the things that they identified as well was, who are the organizations, who are the coalitions and or the collaborations that are working to address different issues, whether it's around rental housing and health and housing conditions, home improvement lending programs or repair programs, whether it's grant or lending, who are the groups that are meeting to convene around different advocacy around lending for purchases or refinances, etc. And then education and building awareness so that people in the community know about the different programs that exist within the neighborhoods. Like you often hear, ACTS is like a best kept secret, but like Dorothy mentioned, they're doing really great work, and we want others to know about this really great work and to take advantage of the different programs that are available. And I think Madwala, you have a question in the chat too about who might somebody contact for eviction prevention work assistance as well. So, we know that there are different organizations focused on different aspects of all things related to both rental and home ownership or owner-occupied housing.
Yeah, I saw community advocates listed in the on the flyer as one of the organizations to reach out to. So it really looks like it's a community community effort. Is there any idea of what the results have been? Has it been working for people? Is this a plan or that's being tweaked regularly? I mean, it's 2 years old now, so.
My understanding is that, yes, they've been working on this, and the city is actively engaged in working within neighborhoods. I know that they will be, they report frequently to their zoning and neighborhood development committee. I don't know the details of those updates, but they are actively engaged. Many of the city departments have representatives that serve on different committees and work groups within the coalitions, working together with community advocates and other service providers around eviction prevention, assistance, home ownership, housing conditions, lending, in all different aspects of what was described in the anti-displacement plan on the development side.
Well, Dwella, what can people do if they need to reach out? How is community advocates helping folks?
Well, right now there's COVID, of course, so things are a little different, but they can simply call our main number, 449-4777 to reach someone. We do have our lobby open, so if they do need to come in, they can simply come into our lobby and see someone. We have housing advocates here 5 days a week, and we can definitely assist them with anything around from looking for housing to having issues with their landlord to making a referral to legal services. We also have legal aid in our building here. So if there's a need for legal services, we can make that direct referral to them.
Shout out to Fondy Food Center, a nonprofit keeping the 103-year-old farmers market in Lindsay Heights 4 days a week. That's straight from the chat. I had to give that shout out. Dr. Jacoby, I see you in the chat talking a lot about solutions with the participants. Kick us off as we sort of wrap up the last 5 minutes of our conversation here. What are some of the things that are being done that government and communities can do and have been doing to provide more healthy housing options?
Yeah, thank you again for allowing me to be on this panel. And I'm a high energy person, so I was kind of getting a little excited. But I think y'all are doing great work, and I love this concept of healthy housing. It's the home, but also the neighborhood, right? So I think I was putting in the chat, we got to invest in community. So how can we leverage community development block grants? How can we leverage tax incremental funding? I'm not a big fan of the opportunity zone stuff that's out there, because you'll give a rich person who's been polluting on you a tax break to pollute on you some more potentially. I'm not sure about that, but some of y'all may like opportunity zones. But those how can we have more leverage over those funding mechanisms that allows for more equity and make it more community driven? In Baltimore, they have equity planning boards, neighborhood-based planning boards. You have the ANC structure in DC that kind of works and sometimes doesn't work, but more, so you have your district, but you got a liaison, a community liaison who's the voice for the community. How can you leverage that more? You have land trusts. Is there a way to do housing trusts and bring in Historic Preservation Act? One of the things we got to do when it comes to neighborhood health, we got to bring the resources back to the people. Bring the jobs back to communities, bring the schools back to communities, bring the grocery stores back to communities. That means investments. And that's one big thing for me as it relates to urban heat island issue. We need to have more urban agriculture. I got a micro farm outside my house. I pick okra every day, y'all. I love the smell of okra in my house, okay? That's an important way to do food forest. Man, you create jobs, you create new microeconomies. Let's remove some of the highways and byways that are our communities and that intrusion of pollution into the houses, right? Into the housing. Let's put in more greenways. Let's do food forest. With stormwater issues, that would help with heat issues, that would help with contact with nature. We have a nature gap in a lot of our urban communities because there's no trees, y'all. So that's a major solution that have major opportunities. We have to make sure that you have anti-gentrification, because what happens is there's this term called green gentrification. You do all that work, you do greening, and then because you didn't put the work on the front end to make sure everybody benefits, it still can lead to displacement. So I'll stop there, but thank you again for the opportunity to speak.
Absolutely, so happy to have you here. Anybody else want to jump in on the solutions end?
Yep, I think for us, I mean, briefly, we spent a year, almost 2 years, talking about solutions for rental housing situations, and we will be in the near future opening our partnership with all the other organizations, our Rental Housing Resource Center. So there'll be a one-stop shop for people that are experiencing issues with landlords, looking for housing and things of that nature, need legal services. They'll be able to come to this location, but we'll have all the housing partners there. So community advocates, Legal Aid, Legal Action, STC, Mediate Milwaukee, Housing Resources, Inc., and a host of other services at our location. So that will be key in addressing some of these issues that we're talking about.
I'm showing your website now. This is the homepage on your website and quick links to a lot of your services. Quickly tell us a little bit about the work you're doing around COVID-19.
Yep, right now we are one of two providers that are providing rental assistance to individuals that have been affected by COVID-19. So individuals that can't work, can't find jobs, and they are in a rental situation, they can come here and we can assist them with rental funds to secure their housing and make sure they're safe and stable. And then if there's a need to move, we can help them with relocation and things of that nature. So we are doing that. And then also on the energy side, because energy burdens is relatively high, we can also provide with energy assistance. They do not have to come into the office to do any of those services. They can do everything online or over the phone. We made it as simple as possible for individuals.
Irma, any last words for the participants?
I would just say keep doing the great work. We are thrilled to be able to partner with organizations that are working really closely with neighbors and residents to provide much needed services to address housing quality, home ownership, and access to equity, and to continue to support those efforts.
Thank you so much. How about you, Dorothy?
So I appreciate the work that Community Advocates does with renters, but renting is so unsustainable for so many people. And I like that Axe Housing is part of the solution to that, because a lot of times we think that low-income people cannot sustain home ownership, but we find that with our program they can. And so the average Axe family who buys a house through us, and especially those who do the rehab, save about $200 a month over renting. That's significant for a family to have that extra $200 for those other needs that they have in their home. And so I like to think that we're part of that solution to this issue of health and housing to help families get a home. So the guys who run our rehab, they have their saying that they look for code compliance, so they make sure the house is up to code, and then they make sure that it has all those core safety features, and then they can work on the Q. So they make sure that the homes that the families buy and that as they're rehabbing them, that they are safe for the families to live in, and they try to get those things done for them so that they are in that position where they're much lower cost of their housing than they were as a renter.
Well, thank you so much. We're right at 3 o'clock, so we're 1 minute away. I want to thank Irma, Maduela, Dorothy, and Shakobi for your passion, for the work that you do, and for everything that you did to really illuminate our understanding around this topic and subject. So the Fuel members know, and they're getting busy in the chat right now. They know at the end, I will ask them to go into the chat room and share some love, tell the panelists what you appreciated about this conversation. what you learned that you didn't know at the start of it. There's folks in the chat wondering, as individual citizens, what can we do to help? Are there organizations we can volunteer with, donate to? Panelists, if you can go in the chat and start dropping some of your information and links. Right now, I'm going to show a video, and Dorothy, I didn't show the Axe Housing website because I actually found an Axe Housing video, and I'm a sucker for a video. And I'm like, I'm going to show this video at the end of it because I was really inspired by it. So I'm going to show this 4-minute video. While we're doing that, I want the participants to continue showing your appreciation in the chat. And panelists, if you're able to hang on for 2 or 3 more minutes, go in the chat room and interact with the panelists as I'm sharing this video. Once this is over, we'll close out and you can get back to the rest of your day. I appreciate all of you so much.
It feels like being trapped, but not in the way you'd think. It's like you're floating in space and you have nothing to grab onto, no way to propel yourself. You're just there, helpless, hopeless, and with no control over the trajectory of your life. Some of us have been homeless. Others have been staying with family or friends or renting. There's never quite enough to cover the bills, to put food on the table, to have a decent, safe place to sleep at night. It's hopeless. Until a friend says, "Have you ever heard of Axe Housing?" When you've been disappointed so many times, you try not to get your hopes up. But then you hear the stories. How are they making the impossible possible? Could it be possible for me? I found it was. Reality sets in though when you realize this might take a minute. There's debt to pay off and bills to pay before you can even think about saving, and your credit score. It is not easy. Honestly, it gets so hard that you think about letting go of the dream and floating back into space. But then your counselor says, "You can do this." And you think, "I can do this." You get a piece of paper. It's a pre-approval letter for a loan. It's an unbelievable feeling of pride and hope for the future mixed with anxiety. Is it really real? You still wonder if there's a catch. You look at houses, look past the rough exteriors, the neglect, and see your family there. You smell your mom's recipes simmering in the kitchen, hear the kids giggling in the backyard, feel the security and comfort of your own bedroom. You close on the house. Axe Housing is there. You are a homeowner. You did it. Now your new reality sets in. It's full of code violations and contractors who don't call back, unexpected repairs and long nights and weekends full of sore muscles, sweat, and tears. What have you gotten yourself into? It's really hard again. Axe Housing is still there, checking in, offering advice, cheering you on. They stand with you like good friends. The greatest day is when we invite those friends and our families to see our new home. It's done. We live here now. It's real. On that day, it feels like something is completed in our hearts. The future looks different. My neighbors are happy to meet me. My kids feel safe. I'm investing in myself and my family's future. Holding those keys, unlocking my door, I'm so proud of that. I'm proud to link arms with the thousands of other families who've been strong enough and worked hard enough to become Axe homeowners. This is the American dream, and it's possible on our blocks, in our neighborhoods, and throughout our city. Now when I meet someone at work or church or another parent at the kids' school who feel at the end of themselves, trapped, stuck in outer space, far from the world they dream of, I always ask them, "Have you heard of Axe Housing?"
I love that video. Thank you, Dorothy, for all you do. Dr. Jacoby, thank you so much for your passion. You're one of us now. You got to be a part of the Milwaukee family. We got to bring you back. Maduela, thank you so much for everything that you do. I would love to talk to you later because that article really, we have a lot of connections, a lot of similarities in our childhood, and our passions around work and helping people are much the same. So thank you. Thank you too.
Thank you for the opportunity.
And Irma, thank you so much for all that you have done over your 16-year career in this world. So I really, really appreciate your work.
And we appreciate the Zilber Foundation very
Absolutely.
much.
That's right. That's absolutely right. So this was a great conversation. We covered a lot of ground in an hour. There's some love notes for you in the chat. I'll copy those and email them to everyone, and I'll email all the participants your contact information. Thank you to the panelists, and thanks again to the participants. I really appreciate you. So finish out your work day. It's my birthday.
Oh, happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
This is a great way for me to spend my birthday with all of you. So thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you.
See you guys
Thanks
later.
to the other panelists too.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
I'll take care.
Bye-bye.